Shalom, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for How History and Genetics Define Jewish Diversity and Identity with Dr. Boris Draznin. And I want to thank our co-sponsors for today's program, Congregation Or Zion, and welcome Andre Ivory to introduce today's guest speaker.
Good day, everyone. Thank you, Alex. So happy to be here and to partner with Valley Beit Midrash again, together with Or Zion. Happy to partner again today for this program. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Boris Draznin. Dr. Draznin is the Celeste and Jack Grinberg Professor of Medicine at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. He is the former president of the Western Association of Physicians and chair of the professional section of the American Diabetes Association. He is a member of the American Association of Physicians and American Society for Clinical Investigation. He authored or edited over 200 scientific articles, book chapters, and individual books themselves. It is my pleasure to turn this over to Dr. Draznin for today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andre. Thank you, Alex, for making it so smooth for me to be able to navigate the Zoom meeting. And certainly thank you, Rabbi Shmuley, for allowing me to share and discuss my book at this forum. Great forum. I enjoyed many lectures. So this is a book. This is a simple question. Are we all cousins? Are we all related in one way or another? And we'll discuss it with you today. We all know that Jewish people for centuries and millennia probably lived in different parts of the world, all over the world, starting with Middle East, moving further east, north to Europe, south to Africa, eventually moving to North and South America and Australia. And what we usually do, frequently name these groups of Jewish people by the geographical area where they live. For example, we call Moroccan Jews those who came from Morocco, Indian Jews who lived for a long time in India, Ethiopian Jews, Yemenite Jews, and so on. And that wide distribution of Jews around the world brings up two important questions. And the question one, are all these Jewish groups related to one another? And the second question, sort of a continuation of the first, relatedness, whether or not all these Jewish groups related to ancient Hebrews who lived in a Holy Land. And in order to answer those two kind of important questions, to me they are important, I hope to you as well, at least of interest, we will, with you today, go fairly briefly over Jewish history, including the history of diaspora, how it happened that we live in all parts of the world, and legends and those various Jewish groups as well. We will then go also fairly briefly through certain genetic concepts that used to establish ancestry and relatedness among those groups. And then at the end, we'll try to weave history and genetics in order to answer those two questions that I posed to you initially, whether we're all related and whether or not we are related to ancient Hebrews. So I assume that all of you know Jewish history, beginning of Jewish history, very well. And for that reason, I'm going to go fairly quickly, but I will be happy to answer at the end any questions that you might have. So our sort of history starts with patriarch Abraham, who with his immediate family left a town, a city in the Mesopotamia, creating a covenant with one God, becoming monotheistic religion, and moving into Canaan, the promised land that God promised to Jewish people. On the way, he had son Isaac, the story of whom also very well known to you, and a grandson Jacob. And two things about Jacob that are really, really clearly important to all of us today. One, that Jacob became known as Israel. He got a new name after wrestling with an angel, or probably with a god, or seeing the god. So he became Israel. And that name that transmitted to all subsequent generations, both to the land of Israel and people of Israel. And a second important point that comes from Jacob is that he had 12 sons that eventually created 12 tribes of Israel. We know he had those 12 sons with 4 different wives, but it doesn't really matter for the purpose of our discussion. Those 12 brothers, 12 sons, came back from Egyptian slavery at the end, something that we will celebrate in a week or less than a week from now, the same holiday. And they all settled as they returned to Canaan on both sides of Jordan River. Here you see that Tiberian Sea and a Dead Sea down here connected by Jordan River, and 12 tribes of Israel lived and had ancestral land on both sides, on the west bank and on the east bank of Jordan River. Now, they're 12 tribes. However, kind of interesting sidebar, that Joseph himself did not receive any tribal land. His 2 sons, so it's a 12 minus 1, it should be 11. But his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, received land. So it's 11 plus 2 should be 13. But then again, Levi, one of the brothers, did not receive any land because Levi's descendants lived among all other tribes. So now we come back to 12 tribes of Israel. And they lived there, arguing with one another, as always Jewish tribes do. And actually, they were fighting one another on occasions. But whenever there was external danger, they united together, and they've selected one leader who would then provide organized defense of all those 12 tribes. And for over 400 years, they used those judges, those leaders selected at the time of external danger. There were 13 men and 1 woman who were good military commanders. Eventually, they understood that to defend their land, they need to be united all the time, not only at the time of mortal existential danger. And so they asked Samuel, the last judge, to appoint a king, so a person who would then be ruling over entire land and entire people of Israel. And so he did. The first king of Israel, Shaul HaMelech, or Saul, King Saul, was anointed by Samuel. And when he fell in one of the battles, and I'm going very quickly through this history, the King David comes to the power, and King David was the one who actually consolidated the entire land of Israel, and he actually won over some adjoining land, and they becoming a great kingdom of Israel. Everything was okay with him, except, as we know from the Bible, that God would not allow him to build a temple because he was too much of a warrior. His hands were in blood, so to speak, because he worked with his sword to defend and create a land of Israel. So that designation of building the temple and actually establishing that state as a very strong and prosperous state came in a part to King Solomon, son of King David. And King Solomon was a wonderful king, very smart, very wise. There are many stories about him. The only negative, if you call it negative part here, or that God considered about him, was that he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. So it was a bit too much, even for that time. And so there was a decision made, by a godly decision, that upon his death, the kingdom will be divided into two. That will not sustain the only kingdom of Israel. And so it happened. The kingdom indeed divided in two, and was a kingdom of Judah down in the south, a kingdom Israel on the north. And these two kingdoms, again, as many tribes before, were not necessarily loving each other. They had a lot of wars, they had a lot of disputes, and eventually they came to the point that they would not defend one another. And when a new empire arose in that Mesopotamia, Middle East area, which is a Assyrian empire, they came and they defeated the northern state of Israel. The southern state of Judah did not really help that much at that point. The Assyrians also came and laid siege to Jerusalem, but they never conquered Jerusalem. They moved back. But what they did, it was kind of one of the first known ethnic cleansing, if you will. They took, as they moved back, they took a lot of Jews from the northern kingdom of Israel and moved them back deep into Assyrian territory. There was a reason for that, military reason. They wanted to prevent revolts on the territory. And to do that, one of the best strategies they had is to disperse population. So the diaspora started, Jewish diaspora, started at that time when Assyrians moved tribes, particularly 10 tribes living up on the territory of Israel, up to Assyrian Empire. As it happens, the empires, one changes, comes after another. The next military power of the Middle East became Babylonian empires that defeated Assyrians. They took over the entire region, and they were actually successful in conquering Jerusalem. They coming in, and they destroyed the first temple built by King Solomon. So, but also during the same time, doing that, they were moving remaining Israelites, this time tribes of Judah and Benjamin, that they were in the southern part of Judah, deep into Babylonian territory. So now the Babylonian Empire contained very large Jewish diaspora community. And comes a couple hundred years, comes Persian Empire into the power. And Persians were Zoroastrians. They were another monotheistic religion. And they actually respected the rights of other minority religions. And a king, Cyrus the Great, the emperor of the great Persian Empire, and his son Darius the Great allowed Jews to return to Jerusalem and to Judah and rebuild the temple. And they actually gave money, gave support for doing so. But as always happens with diaspora, not every family moved back. A couple hundred years came of the living in the depth of Persian Empire and Babylonian and Assyrian empires previously. And so people did not want to uproot their families again and move to Jerusalem, move to Judah. So the diaspora stayed all the time, even though many people have returned, many people participated in rebuilding the temple, and a second temple was built at that time. A couple hundred years forward, another empire comes to the Middle East. This time it's Macedonian or Greek Empire with Alexander the Great, who marched through Turkey, through that Mesopotamia area, into Egypt first, and then to Asia, coming all the way almost to India, creating a large Greek empire. And as you look at those black dots, you can see major Jewish communities stayed in diaspora. They never came back. And one of the major sort of factors was that when the Greek Empire fell apart into two, Ptolemaic Empire in Egypt and Seleucids in the east, they were fighting each other. And they were fighting very commonly here in the area of Judah, previous kingdom of Israel and Judah. So that territory down there around Jerusalem was very dangerous territory. So not many people would like to go back there. And indeed, they settled in various parts of Greek Empire. Look at Alexandria, became the second largest Jewish city during that time. There was a huge Jewish community, and you see the Jewish communities all over Babylonian, Persian territory, in Turkey, and as we'll see in a second, literally in a second, when the next empire comes in play, which is a Roman Empire, they are now all over Asia, Jews, I mean, all over Asia. They are in Turkey, in Greece, in Italy, in Spain, all around Mediterranean Sea, and moving further north into Central Europe and Southern Europe as well. Then Judeo-Roman wars did not help Jews to stay in the territory of their ancestral land. And in fact, when they lost the final war in 135, following Bar Kokhba revolt, the Hadrian, emperor of Rome at that time, renamed that territory. It's no longer Judah. It became Syria Palestina. That's the first time that term Palestina comes about. And that Jerusalem was also named Aelia Capitolina, into different city. So now, and Jews no longer allowed to be there, and the diaspora settles. Now that's all those ethnic different Jewish groups are living in a different areas of the world, primarily Europe around Mediterranean Sea, in Africa, and in Asia. So with that in mind, that's the history, how that diaspora settled. Now we'll go and look at the genetic components that would allow us, or would not allow us, one way or the other, to establish relatedness of all these Jewish groups and how they might relate to ancient Hebrews. Every one of you, and Alex will tell me how many viewers we have, but every one of you have created a family tree. I am sure about that, or tried at least once to make circles and say, here's my mom, my grandma, my great-grandparents, what have you. So it's a very familiar to everyone. I want you right now, for the sake of our discussion, assume that you are this young man, Ben Brown, that red-haired down on the bottom of your slide. And that's you, and that's me. And so if I am a Ben Brown or I'm Boris Draznin, for sure I have two parents. So I have my mother and I have my father. Each of my parents has their own parents. So as we go in the generations back, the number of ancestors doubles all the time. So now Ben Brown has, in the second generation after him, has 4 ancestors. If we look at this slide, and here's on the bottom, here's in the middle, it's kind of multicolor, that's that Ben Brown, or it's you, each of us. So we know that in the first generation, we have 2 ancestors. Going back in another generation, we have 4, and we have 8 great-grandparents. And if we go back 6 generations, which is about 120, 150 years back from nowadays, so it's the beginning of 20th century, each of us had 64 ancestors. Imagine that one more thing from this slide, that you here as a child inherited 50% DNA or inherited information from your father and 50% from your mother. Going one generation back, you inherited information from your grandparents, 25% from each. And you go back, and that information becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And in your sixth generation, when you have 64 ancestors, you only inherit 1.5% of genetic information from each of those ancestors. Very small, tiny amount. Now, that's kind of very much telling the story. If you are, or someone is born at the time of King David and going and looking back at the time of Patriarch Abraham, that person, newborn, would have 16,000 ancestors. And it's not going to be 1.5 DNA that person inherits. It would be a minute amount, almost nothing. If you look from David going forward to Babylonian exile, it's another 14 generation. And from Babylonian exile until the turn of the millennia, which is a common era or time of Jesus Christ, it's another 14 generation. So if someone is born at the time of Jesus Christ and walks the earth and walks the territory of Judah or Israel, that person has, look, for 42 generation back, for whatever, it's beyond trillion, quadrillion, 398 trillion, 46 million ancestors. So the genetic information received from that ancient Hebrews is minute in our blood. And now, if you look at today, 2024, and counting your generations back to the time of the beginning of second millennia, then it's a number that I can't even pronounce how many generations back you go to that. And yet we do inherit some genetic information from all those generations. So how do we do that? So first of all, the genetic information is transmitted by the DNA, the deoxynucleic acid, that is stored in every cell's nucleus. 90+% of DNA lives in a cell nucleus, with some in a mitochondria. That will become important in a minute as we discuss it. So that DNA, it's stored in a form of chromosomes in the nucleus of every cell. So humans have 46 chromosomes, kind of organized in pairs. So there are 23 pairs of chromosomes, and each of them we receive from mother and another one from our father. So it's the 23 chromosome from one parent, 23 from another, combining together, it's 46 chromosomes. So how that genetic information comes to us, it's by virtue of reproductive cells that we all create, and then those reproductive cells combine into new organism. So as those reproductive cells being created, the number of chromosomes splits from 46. Now each reproductive cell, in case of a man, it's a sperm, will carry 23 chromosomes. And in case of a woman, each egg, matured egg, will also carry 23 chromosomes. So we have 23 chromosomes from father, 23 from mother, and when they fertilize, when they unite, that newborn, new embryo will now have 46 chromosomes all over again. So that's the information, the genetic information that you receive. Let's come back for a second to pedigree that we all know and will try to create. So when you build your family tree, you know that you might be related to your great-grandpa who came from Germany, England, or whatever country he came in. But, and you know exactly, you found him, you found his name, you found how he moved here. But you may or may not have his genetic material. On the average, you will have certain percentage, but in general, it's not necessarily. Genetic information that you receive may come from other ancestors down and not from that particular individual. How that happens? That happens because of process that it's called recombination or crossover of genetic material. Remember, we just talked that this pair of chromosome divides as sex reproductive cells are being built into two. So each cell will carry only one chromosome. As that during that process, there might be crossover of some genetic material from one chromosome onto another. Here is designated, let's say this is paternal chromosome, and this is maternal one, and that material from paternal can separate and jump into maternal chromosome and replace that piece on maternal. So each chromosome still has the same number of genes and the same genes as before, but they're not necessarily all maternal or all paternal. They cross over. So what that results into, as this sex cells being developed, there might be one sex cell or egg or sperm that carries unperturbed chromosome, fully paternal chromosome. The other one may have fully maternal chromosomes. The other ones will have certain degree of crossover, and we have no control over that process. It's the random process when some parts of DNA will jump from one chromosome to another and then will become a part of that reproductive cell. So just to summarize that for you, how genetic material is being transmitted, you can receive genetic material from nuclear DNA from both your mother and father into the same individual, and it goes through generation, obviously diluting the original DNA. You might remember I told you that small percentage of DNA lives in a cell organelle that is called mitochondria. And that DNA is transmitted only on maternal line. So mothers transmit it to daughters. Daughter transmit to her daughters. Her daughter will transmit to her daughters. So it goes only on maternal line. It's never transmitted from father to their children. So by using that sort of genetic tool, one can look at the maternal inheritance through generations. On the other hand, Y chromosome that determines the existence of male sex and male gender, male genes, is only transmitted from father to son. And it's never transmitted on maternal line. So using that Y chromosome material, one can establish or at least look at paternal line of inheritance. So that's laboratories that use several tools to look at our ancestral DNA and compare to ancestral or other. They isolate DNA, break it into levels at the levels of nucleotides, which is 4 of them: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, and then isolating those DNA nucleotides from either entire genomic DNA or only maternal DNA or only from paternal, which is Y chromosome. So stay with me for one more sort of a complex concept that will show us how science compares the current DNA that we have with the ancestral DNA. So once you develop, when you isolated DNA, you look at certain nucleotides, sequence of those nucleotides. And that creates what they call a haplotype or genetic passport. For example, the individual 1 here has haplotype that consists of thymine, guanine, thymine, cysteine, cytosine, and thymine. Another person has mutated or mutation in their DNA, and instead of thymine is here adenine. So when you isolate it, you look that there is a different pattern of DNA within similar area of DNA, the same. And that's called haplotype number 2. And a third person will have haplotype 3. Why do we do that? So the answer to that question is that if I isolate and somebody isolate my DNA and I belong to this haplotype 3, so anyone who belongs to this has the same haplotype is likely to have the same ancestry as I do. If somebody, the DNA does not have the same haplotype, then we are probably not related, and we probably do not belong to the same ancestral group. So using this approach, using this technique and isolating different parts of the DNA from Y chromosome, scientists first in Israel and Haifa were able to identify 6 markers from Y chromosome from the people who claim to be Cohen, to belong to that priestly wave of the Jewish population. And indeed, Ashkenazi Kohanim had 50 or close to 50% chance of having that particular haplotype, and Sephardic Kohanim slightly even higher percentage than Ashkenazi Kohanim. So if somebody comes to you and says, I am a Kohen, and that person has this particular haplotype, it is at least 50% chance that that person is indeed a Kohen and may be going back into Levi's and Aaron generations in the ancient Hebrews. The problem with that is that 5% people who are not Kohanim also have that particular haplotype. And also that haplotype found among non-Jewish people, and Yemenite and Negev Bedouin and Kurds in Iraq. So finding that haplotype does not mean 100% that one is a Kohen, but it's 50% chance that one is if that person has verbal history of belonging to Kohanim. Another interesting point of the genetic comparison that was used to establish our genetic identity. There's a natural selection and genetic drift. The natural selection you all know from your studying of regular biology, and to simplify it, that if animal walks the prairies and it has a fruit hanging off the tree and it's very tall, so only animals with a long neck will be able to get it. And so natural selection offers advantage to those animals with longer and longer neck. And so next generation will become even longer neck and so on until they look like contemporary giraffe. The genetic drift is a little different. It divides into sort of 2 aspects, bottleneck effect and a founder effect. Let's say you had a swarm of butterflies flying, and there's some of them red, some green, some yellow, and a wind blew some of those butterflies on a ship that was docked in a port, and there were only yellow butterflies that happened to be there. And then ship that sailed came to another island, and those butterflies went off to the land, and now they're only yellow butterflies because it's drifted. Their genes of those people of those butterflies, those animals, insects, drifted to the next place. And a bottleneck is a little bit different, but similar in a way that, for example, there were a lot of people with variety of genes, and then something cataclysmic, catastrophic happened. Let's say crusaders came through the village and they slaughtered all the inhabitants, and only a few left alive who went to the woods to collect wood or something, not being in a village during that crusader slaughter. So those people are only staying alive, and now new generation of people who will arise from only those who survived will have genes of people who survived. So they were not necessarily the best genes. They're not necessarily the strongest genes, but the bottleneck effect, that's the only ones that have survived. So let's look at that right now, how what happened to the Jewish people that moved away into diaspora. First, look at two countries, Yemen and Ethiopia, that are on both sides of an entrance to the Red Sea. They're very close to one another. And they, at some point, they were united by the kingdom of Sheba. And, remember the story of Queen of Sheba, who was ruling that kingdom. And at some point, she figured out that there is another kingdom of Israel, and there's a king, very smart King Solomon, who rules that land. And she decided to go visit King Solomon to pick up some of his wisdom, knowledge, how to make a strong empire. And so she went there, spent a couple of months with King Solomon, and then she comes back to Kingdom of Sheba, not only with the wisdom that she picked up, but also pregnant from King Solomon at that time. And so she united with King Solomon, and she gives birth to a king of Ethiopia called Menelik I. And that empire of King Menelik stayed until approximately 1974, with the last emperor that you probably all remember, Haile Selassie, who was then killed by, dethroned first and killed by the communist revolution in Ethiopia. So the Ethiopian Jews who call themselves Beta Israel have the legends that they are descendant from Queen Sheba and King Solomon as the royal family, and the rest of them descendant from other Jews arriving to Ethiopia with the queen. There is, although albeit minimal, support for parental gene pool, for Y chromosome gene pool, but maternal chromosomal and maternal DNA was clustered with neighborhood populations, suggesting that Jewish men coming down from Middle Eastern territory have married local women who then converted to Judaism. Ethiopian Jews accepted as Jews by Sephardic chief rabbinate in Israel, but there is a tribe of people, Falal Shmura, who similar to Ethiopian Jews, but they have converted to Christianity somewhere in their history. They need to reconvert, undergo conversion. The Jews of Yemen, who live just north of Ethiopia, have different legend in there, different story of their appearance there. They claim to be tribes of Judah, Benjamin, Levi, and Reuben, who listened to Jeremiah's prediction that first temple will be destroyed, and they moved to Yemen, moved to Kingdom of Sheba with Queen of Sheba at that time, but they stayed on the Asian territory, not going south into the African territory. We know about them from Benjamin of Tudela, was a Jewish traveler, explorer, 100 years before Marco Polo. We know that Maimonides wrote letters to Jews of Yemenite Jews in 12th century. And interestingly, that the haplotype, that genetic passport between Yemenite and Ethiopian Jews are totally different. So it's possible that they came from a very different tribe. There again, Y chromosome genes are similar to other Jewish population, but maternal DNA traces to Western Asian and African women, again supporting the notion that mainly Jewish men came in and married local women in that territory. We go farther south into Africa, in Western Africa, there's a country of Nigeria. I'm sure it's on the news from time to time. And within Nigeria, there's a land that's called Igbo land, and there are Igbo tribes. A lot of those Igbo tribes now Christian and Muslim, but some part of them are Jewish, and they consider themselves descendants of one of the tribes of Israel. It's a tribe of God, seventh son of Jacob. They perform circumcision on the 8th day. They keep kosher, wear talit, kippah, celebrate Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, but they also have mixture of Judaism and Christianity. And nowadays they're drifting more into true Judaism from what they were. Farther south from Nigeria, there is a tribe of Jews called Lemba Jews who live another 2,800 miles south from Igbo in a territory between Zimbabwe and South Africa. And those Jews, nobody knows how they went there and what their ancestral tribe might have been. They may have come from Yemen. They might come through Igbo Jews down into that territory of Africa. But what's interesting about them, that they also observe Shabbat, do not eat pork, they do practice circumcision, they use Star of David on their tombstones, they don't have Torah, they used oral law, and now they build new synagogues and trying to become more Jewish in a way that we recognize as a Jewish. Very interesting that these people have 50% Semitic Y chromosome, similar to what Kohanim had in Middle Eastern Kohanim, Ashkenazi and Sephardic. There's a clear possibility that they are on the male side also related to ancient Hebrews. Many Jews, as we know, stayed back in Persia. They did not return to land of Israel, did not return to Judah, did not participate in rebuilding Second Temple, and they continue to stay. And instead, they moved north and east. They went to Turkey, Armenia, Georgia, to Bukhara, all the way to India. Some went west to Egypt. Most of these Babylonian or Persian Jews, 70% of them, had inherited Y chromosome from common ancestors. Genetically, they are much closer to one another and the other Jews than to Palestinian and Kurds. Here's the two groups that probably came in as a part of migration from Persian Jews. And that one group is in Georgia, which is Russian Georgia. They live here. What they call founder effect. When a couple of families, probably several families from Persian Jews moved up north into Caucasus Mountains and settled there, and they could trace 50% of them to a single female, a single mother of the Georgian Jews. The similar effect is with the mountain Jews that live in the mountain of Azerbaijan. They have totally different language, by the way, right now. They have the mountain Jews speak Tat Persian and Hebrew language, mixture of that, Judeo-Tat they call it. And they have 58% of them attract to one single woman. Again, it's very clear effect, what they call it, founder effect. Then there's a Bukharan Jews, the Jews that moved even farther east from Persia, probably through Afghanistan into Tajikistan and back to Uzbekistan. There's many stans there. And they claim their ancestral claim to belong to the tribe of one of the 12 tribes, Issachar. And Issacharov is a common name. They speak Judeo-Persian language, which is very similar to Farsi. They have Y chromosome, male chromosome, similar with other Jews, much closer than with non-Jewish populations there. Several groups that move even farther east than Bukharan Jews, and they went to India. And there are 3 groups of Jews in India. One, they called themselves Bnei Israel, and they lived in around Mumbai area. They have more genetic similarities with Jews, but they have a great admixture with locals, probably 20, 30 generations back from not right now. Jewish men, again, married local women, creating that tribe of Bnei Israel or Indian Jewish population. Cochin Jews lived on the southern tip of India, and they claim that some of them came to India in the 1st century, but during the first temple, actually, but the documented evidence present there from about 9th century Common Era. They have Jewish and non-Jewish ancestors. Again, both groups of those Jews of India practiced Judaism through all the century. So religiously, there have been never any question about their Jewishness. Genetically, they have a huge admixture with local population. The third group of Jews, it's Baghdadi Jews that lived mainly in Calcutta. Those Jews came from Baghdad, from Barsa, Aleppo, somewhere in 18th century. They have nothing to do with this sort of 2 other tribes of Jews in that. There's a small group of Chinese Jews who lived in Kaifeng. Nobody left right now. There are some people claiming they descended from Kaifeng Jews. They converting back into Judaism, and they live in Israel, but no one actually left in China of that. The other large group of Jews that moved along Mediterranean Sea, along the northern border of Africa, northern side of Africa, which is south part of Mediterranean Sea, and they lived in, I told you, like Alexandria became the largest city of with Jewish population and diaspora, and they lived all over that territory. In Libya, and the area called Cyrenaica, then Jews lived from the time of Ptolemaic Empire. The Jews in Tunisia and the island of Jerba, probably merchants from the first time of the first temple that lived there. And now there are at least 3 synagogues there that are very frequently visited by Jewish populations. And in Morocco, the Jews lived from Solomon time, and Berbers who converted to Judaism before they became Muslim, and that there are several tombstones in Berber cities with clear Hebrew inscriptions on them. So they carry Y chromosome of Middle Eastern origin. They have maternal DNA similar among Jewish groups, with 42% of Middle Eastern and 39% of European admixture. I'm going fairly fast right now through Sephardic Jews who were expelled from Spain, moved into Ottoman Empire that gladly accepted them, moved into Greece, from which to, with the Ottoman Empire, to Southern Europe. A lot of them moved to Italy, and a large wave moved to Northern Europe, to Amsterdam and Hamburg. The Sephardic Jews, Y paternal line chromosome, have typical 65% Middle Eastern origin, and then typical European admixture. Interestingly, that people living in Andalusia right now, in Galicia and Portugal, have a lot of Jewish admixture. They are practicing Catholics, obviously, but they have a lot of Jewish genetic printout. Many Ashkenazi Jews also have Sephardic admixture because there's Sephardic moved through Italy and Greece to Southern Europe. They mixed with that. And the final group is the Ashkenazi Jews, that's the largest group today. They moved to Europe probably through Armenia. The Ashkenaz one is a great son of Noah, and that's the land was given to him around Mount Ararat. And Ashkenaz is actually quite significantly popular Armenian name. Now, I want you to concentrate. A lot of Jews lived here in the Rhine River Valley, but one town, Erfurt in Germany, kind of becomes important, right in the middle of Germany here, because that small town had a large Jewish cemetery. And during construction, with expanding city of Erfurt, the construction workers unearthed a lot of skeletons not too far from Jewish cemeteries. And the Jewish law prohibits to extract DNA from all this bones. So they eventually settled on extracting DNA from the teeth that fell out from the skulls of those people. And so when they did that, they found out that 33 skeletons that they sort of looked belonged to approximately the same time, 14th century, then the Jews were killed and expelled from German territory. Genetically, they were similar to Ashkenazi Jews with substantial Southern European, mainly Italian, and some other Slavic admixture, Eastern European admixture. 33% had specific Ashkenazi maternal DNA, and almost no admixture of other Europeans following 14th century. So Ashkenazi Jews who measuring and examine their DNA right now could be adequately sort of connected with this Ashkenazi Jews found in the 13th century in the middle of Germany. I'll skip through that, and I'll just tell you that studies of DNA of Iranian, Iraqi, Syrian, Italian, Turkish, and Ashkenazi Jews figured out that there are two branches of Jews that clearly split somewhere 100 to 150 generations back in our history, which is approximately 2,500 years ago, which is approximately, again, the time of Babylonian exile. And they split into Iranian and Iraqi Jews, those who went to Babylonian exile, and the Jews who stayed and went to Mediterranean regions, and the Syrian, Italian, Turkish, and Ashkenazi Jews. That have probably happened about 2,500 years ago, 2,500, 2,500. So are we all cousins? We do have European admixture and about 30 or 60% of Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews. 50% of Ashkenazi Jews have Y chromosome haplotype of Middle Eastern origin. I don't think that the farther away we go from the history, from those beginning of millennia ancient Jews, that we'll be able to find any stronger evidence. But the evidence is fairly strong that most Jewish tribes, most Jewish groups related to one another in a level of 30 to 50% probability, and the same 40 to 50% probability of us being related to ancient Hebrew at that time. Now, thank you for your attention. It took me a bit longer, maybe 5 minutes longer, but please clap at your home and ask me not very hard questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, we do have a little bit of time left. If anyone would like to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hands and we can call on people too. All right, I see Stan, and then I'll try to get to everyone. We only have a couple minutes left, so I'll try to ask a couple, and then Dr. Draznin, if you don't mind, I can share your contact information with people if they'd like to ask other questions.
Absolutely. They can write me, and I'm very fast in writing back.
Great.
And mine is quite short, but Dr. Draznin, thank you so much for explaining this really well. Is the Rhine theory still the dominant theory of Jewish immigration to Western Europe?
Immigration from where to where? What?
From the Mediterranean up into Central Europe, as opposed to, say, the Caucasus or some other theory.
No, yes and no.
Okay.
Yes is that they finally, historically, we know the most artifact, the most mentioning and everything that they come to Rhine River Valley. But the movement that came through Greece and Italy to Southern Europe and going a little bit north from there through current Yugoslavia, Hungary, and maybe into the Slavic land of Ukraine, it's also a strong possibility. Obviously, the third wave, it's from Sephardic Jews who were exiled from Spain, and then they went through Amsterdam, Hamburg, and Northern Europe. But Rhine theory is a strong theory, no questions about that, but not the sole possibility.
Thank you. Let's go to Nicole.
Hi, I was wondering because my dad's side, the name Corrado, actually, it's from Calabria. My father's father was born in Calabria, Italy. But recent DNA tests that my cousin on my dad's side did show that there was quite a bit of Jewish genetics, and it shows that on the Corrado side. And it turns out that Corrado came from actually originated from Spanish Jews who were forced into Catholicism during the Spanish Inquisition. So how much Jewish ancestry do you think, or Jewish genetics do you think I would likely have? I've never had DNA tested myself. And the other question I have is, which tribe of Israel would that ancestry likely have come from? If they were in Calabria, Spanish Jews who would have been forced into.
Well, let me start with the second part of your question. It is impossible to know. Most likely, however, they are from either Judah or Benjamin, because the other 10 tribes were sent into exile by Assyrian and Babylonians much earlier than subsequent Jews who went through northern Africa to Spain. So most likely, if not related to you, but that's Sephardic Jews most likely came from Benjamin, which is a smaller tribe, and Judah, which is a larger tribe. Most likely, not necessarily 100%, but most likely. The other question, that is absolutely true what you said, Nicole, that a lot of Sephardic Jews, upon expulsion from Spain, went back to Italy. It's an enormous group by size. They went to Italy. They went to various settlements there. And so it's not surprising that you'll have Spanish blood, so to speak, with the Italian admixture. How much Jewish genetic information you have, it's hard to say. Remember, it depends on the number of generation that you went and recombination in your particular case, because you may have your genealogical line very clearly defined through the Sephardic Jews, but you may or may not have the DNA from the same people along your line. So the best thing to do is to check it to see. I know we were surprised. My wife, who is totally Ashkenazi Jewish descent, had 20% Italian DNA. Said, "Oh my God, what happened?" But that's the bottom line that I can answer you on that. So it's check, see, and then we'll rediscuss that again.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry that we're out of time, but I did put Dr. Draznin's email in the chat if anyone would like to copy that down and ask another question to him through email. Thank you so much. This was a great presentation, very fascinating, and thank you all for tuning in. Just want to let everyone know about our next class, which will be on April 25th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. How were women the heroines of the Passover story, and what rituals have we taken on to honor them? With Rabbinite Sharona Halleck. So hope you can all tune into that Passover class with us, and wishing you all a Chag Sameach. Have a great holiday.